is up, YouTube? Guys, Jericho 426 coming at you with another Marvel Contest of Champions video, and today, guys, we are going to be doing a guide to the Cavalier monthly side event. So let's jump right into it, guys, and see who are some of the best champions to take in and what nodes are we dealing with this month. So I've already completed all the way through. I have not explored all the way through. In our first side quest, we are going to be using, or side event, we are going to be using Cosmic Attackers, okay? So with the Cosmic ones, they have a 10% chance for each armor break on the defender to gain that passive fury. And every 3 seconds, the defender will gain an armor up buff. So that means you are going to want Cosmic champions that easily armor break the opponent. Your best ones are going to be Corvus and Angela. And I actually found Null to be quite good. Silver Surfer as well. Silver Surfer is another really good one. But I use Null, Angela, and Corvus for most of these things. Now, there aren't too many super difficult fights. Now, I'm going to label the lanes kind of A, B, and C going from left to right. On your left lane, you will have to deal with an Omega Sentinel, but easily bringing in someone like CGR or Corvus or Angela or Null again. Even Silver Surfer maybe could do well with her, getting those armor up buffs down. You do have a Null, gotta watch out for the Null a little bit. Now, there's not a great counter within the Cosmic class for Null, but just watch out for that Null. Remember, he does have that reverse controls once he initiates that special one. And then we do have a Havoc down that lane as well. Again, for Havoc, you're going to want somebody that has an armor up buff. And so looking at Silver Surfer, again, Odin would be a good one, as well as Angela. Again, Angela was my go-to for most of this act on the 2 lanes that I did anyway. And then I also did use Corvus for a little bit as well. Let's talk about Kraven here, though. Now, on Kraven, we have Healer Hide every 12 seconds. He gains regeneration. If you back up far away from him, he's not going to get that. You're going to get it. When the attacker is inflicted with a root effect, they are also inflicted with a disorient. Again, you're going to have to deal with that root mechanic a little bit, so just make sure you're working your way around it. Shank. So when striking the defender's block, the attacker has a 40% chance to be inflicted with a bleed debuff. So in this case, this is going to interact with another node, and it kind of doesn't necessarily limit what you're doing, but if you want to avoid this one, just completely don't strike the block. Don't try to go into him and bait him a little bit by hitting the block. But if you're worried about that's your play style, then make sure you do bring in a bleed immune champion. Coolant Leak, whenever a robotic attacker would gain a bleed debuff, they instead gain an incinerate. So I just left robotic champions out of this one. I didn't want to even bother trying to bring them in. I just chose a bleed immune champion to use for mine, or actually someone who benefited from that. And finally, Clapback. When a poison, shock, or bleed, incinerate, or plasma debuff is placed on the defender, the same debuff is placed on the attacker. So looking at Kraven, I chose Omega Red to go against him. He was fantastic. Again, if he gets that bleed immunity, he just activates his death field. That's awesome. But looking at some other champions, Toad, really good one. You can inflict the poison and not have to worry about it. Just don't hit that block. Sauron, he is immune to both bleed and poison, so he was a really good option as well. Omega Red, again, as I already said. Colossus is immune to the bleed mechanic, and he's not going to put anything back on himself. Iceman, again, immune to that bleed. Red Mags has a higher immunity, like a 90% immunity to it, so you still kind of got to be a little careful on that, but you should be fine with Red Mags. Angela, again, she's not immune, but she can shrug off any of those debuffs. Gore, cool thing about Gore is he heals up when he has a debuff on him that matches one of his black, what are they called, the black magic buffs, so that's kind of cool. CGR being bleed immune, and then King Groot as well. So great champions to bring in, and again, I went with Omega Red. So let's move on, guys, to Cavalier 1.2. In this one, we are looking at Science Attackers, and this was actually kind of a good quest or event line, because the funny thing is, so many of these Cavalier event quests have like 1 or 2 champions that are really great, but this one you could almost use you could use a ton of the Science class. So let's look at this. Each time a Science attacker knocks the defender down while they are suffering from a power sting, slow, or weakness affect the defender. Basically, applies a Petrify. And then each time the defender would gain power while suffering from a Petrify, Innervate, or Suppression, Science attackers gain that Fury passive, right? So the interesting thing was here, you can either find someone who has that slow, power, sting, or weakness, or you can just find someone who already can Innervate, Petrify, or Suppression. So we got a long list of options here, guys. Quicksilver, really good one. Captain America Infinity War, if you're going to bring in a tech with him for his well-timed blocks. Again, I didn't go that route because I didn't want to bring in a tech for this entire quest. She-Hulk was fantastic. She-Hulk pretty much did the entire quest line for me with the exception of like 2 fights. Spider-Gwen, Spider-Ham, Void, Red Guardian, Yellow Jacket. Mr. Fantastic with She-Hulk is really good because if you don't know, they're synergized together, and so that all the science attackers will actually apply a Power Sting debuff, or 3 Power Sting debuffs, up to 3, to the attacker. So you're already getting that Power Sting, but plus She-Hulk has a slow debuff, plus she has a Petrify. I mean, she's just amazing. Titania, if any of you guys have a Titania, this is a great time to break her out. Titania, her light attacks actually apply a suppression, and her special attacks all apply a weakness debuff. So she is great for this fight. Thing, Ant-Man, you can finally break out that Ant-Man. Immortal Hulk, Joe Fixit, and Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom was another big one excuse me, for this whole quest line. So going down this first little path that I went, the only thing really to worry about in here are Longshot and Kitty Pryde. For Longshot, definitely bring in Void, Torch, Anti-Venom, or Red Hulk. I used Anti-Venom and he just obliterated him. Same thing for Kitty, someone who is Incinerate immune, so Anti-Venom or Torch. Again, I used Anti-Venom, completely obliterated her. Somewhere in here, there is a Thing as well. Again, Quicksilver or She-Hulk worked great for Thing for me. There is a Icarus in this quest line as well. Bringing in, so you want to again bring in that Incinerate immune. So looking at Void, Torch, Anti-Venom, or Red Hulk. Mojo as well is on this one, and using Quicksilver or Spy 2099, avoid gaining any of those buffs. Now, when we are looking at the boss, who I thought was going to be a menace, but actually wasn't that bad of a menace, we're looking at Green Goblin. Of course, you know the bad thing about Green Goblin is he has so many of these long special attacks and they're just hard to dex. He does have enhanced special 2, which means it is unblockable. Definitely want to try to avoid pushing into that special 2 because it seems like he can just throw that thing out of nowhere. Special attacks for both champions cost 50% less power, so he's much more likely to be pushed to the special 2. There's a power leak, 50% chance for critical hits to cause power leak for the attacker over time, and whenever power empties to 0, you suffer damage as well. Excuse me. And then every 15 seconds, whatever champion has the least amount of power is fate sealed. So this one I thought was going to be a mess. So actually, I just brought in Miles Morales to avoid that unblockable. And I'm actually really glad I did. It helped out a lot. I took him in one fight, didn't die at all. I think I took about 50% health off. Blech, cannot talk tonight. And my Miles is only like, I don't know, 9,000 power level. Is really low. And so, but a couple other options. Gilly 2099, being able to power control a little bit. Same thing with Warlock, Vision, Magic, or Spider-Gwen. You can use any of those to power lock, or power control, I should say. Strife, really good with Strife because if you apply the concussion, you can then avoid those unblockable attacks. You can block them. Miles Morales, as I said, Mr. Sinister, again, able to block unblockable special attacks. Ghost Kitty, and then I didn't try this one for this fight specifically, but Infamous Iron Man. So that might work really well, again, with the power control, even being able to special lock him. If you can time it just right, you can special lock him for almost the entire fight. All right, guys, moving on to 2.1, we are looking at the mutant attackers here. They will gain an indefinite passive whenever they gain a regeneration buff. But on the other side of this, each hit in the special attack of an attacking mutant champion has a 30% chance to grant a regeneration buff. So you don't necessarily have to have a regen champion. However, there is one last part of this, and that is every time the defender is struck, they have a 20% chance to passively regenerate 90% of the damage dealt. The only time this doesn't apply is if that damage is taken when the attacker has a regen. So, in other words, they're going to regen a lot of health unless you have a regen currently active on you. So, that being said, it does open us up to quite a few champions. Again, you have your normal regen champions, your Wolverine, your Deadpool, Sabretooth, X-23, Toad if you back him into a wall. But again, you've got a really good chance on your special attacks in order to gain a regen buff. So I wouldn't worry about having those region champs unless you just have a great region champ that's ranked up for you. But a couple of specific champions to look out for in this quest line. Toad is number one. You want either a poison immune champion or make sure that you are bringing someone in who can shrug off the poisons. That is not a science. And don't push Toad into the wall. That's the big thing. So I used Toad against Toad. It worked out fantastic. Sauron, Omega Red, again, really great. Iceman and Emma Frost as well. Those were all great. Kingpin is right after him. Now, Kingpin has a lot of options. Toad being number one. Toad is a great Kingpin counter. Bishop, again, another great Kingpin counter. Captain Britain, Apocalypse, which I think most people know, and Archangel can be a good counter. Now, even though this is what some people would consider an easy lane in the middle because it doesn't have a bunch of extra nodes on it. This was kind of a, I mean, you look at this has got a Toad, a Kingpin, and then a Super Scroll, and Super Scroll, as we know, is kind of a annoying defender. So for Super Scroll, I actually used Kitty, which had some weird interactions. I forgot that his attacks really can't miss, and so he kept on hitting me, but my Kitty is awakened. So it sounds weird saying my Kitty, but my Kitty is awakened, and so she didn't take any damage from it. But she is Incinerate immune as well, so it worked out, and I ended up getting the win. But just know Kitty has some weird interactions, and if you don't have her awakened, she will start taking damage even when she is phased. Colossus, again, Incinerate immune. Emma Frost, Havoc, and Sunspot, all these guys are Incinerate immune. Of course, Emma Frost only when she is in her diamond form. There is also down here on the right an Annihilus. When it comes to mutants and fighting Annihilus, again, if you're just a really skilled player, anybody can fight Annihilus. But if you're looking at specific mutants to take him on, then I use Storm Pyramid X because she does have the ability to, whenever they purify or are immune to stun, she will activate a passive stun. So she's a great counter to Annihilus. We do have on up this right line as well a Korg. Korg's a little bit of a tricky one. So non-contact attacks or energy-based attacks. Looking at Korg, looking at Captain Britain, Domino potentially, Professor X, or Omega Red. Any of those with his cynical attacks. Any of those could be viable options for Korg. And then, not that he's hard, but there is an Abomination, so just make sure you do bring in a Poison Immune champion for that line. When we go down here to the right, there is a Torch. So again, looking at those Incinerate Immune champions. Same ones for Super Scroll. And I'll just kind of lump these all in. There's a Super Scroll, a Torch, a Bishop, and all three of these, you should really bring in an Incinerate immune champion. So again, with the mutants, looking at Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Emma Frost, Havoc, or Sunspot. And when we get into the boss, guys, this was actually, I think, probably the most aggravating boss because, well, let's just read the notes, and I'll kind of give you the lowdown on what happened here. So, critical setup, when the attacker ends a combo with the same attack they ended their previous combo with, the attack is a guaranteed critical hit. Sounds pretty good, right? But the defender takes 100% less damage from hits that are not critical. So you want to hit a critical. Except, let me just kind of skip down to Critical Eye. Whenever the attacker crits on the defender gains an unblockable charge. So you want to crit because you can't hurt him unless you crit, but then when you crit, he becomes unblockable, right? And so now if he tries to hit you and then you dex out of the way, that unblockable charge is gone. As soon as he tries to hit, it's gone. But it can stack up 7 unblockables in a row, and he can have to hit or try to hit you 7 times. And so just be aware of that. There's Combo Party. Every 10 hits on their combo meter, the attacker gains a permanent cruelty buff, increasing critical damage. And then every 10 hits in the attacker's combo meter grants them an indefinite shrug off passive. And I never really saw the shrug off passive come into play. So let me just say, this was a pretty tough fight at first. I mean, again, it wasn't the most difficult thing I've ever done, but the problem is you're having to crit, and then when you crit, he becomes unblockable. The problem is whenever you get that unblockable and he has his special up, because that special one can be a little bit difficult to deck. So when you're looking at this, you either want someone who crits a lot, or sometimes doesn't crit at all, and then has like crits on the special attack. So Captain Britain. Captain Britain is who I used, and it worked out quite well. Actually, I lied. I used Captain Britain at first, and then I died as Captain Britain because of those unblockable special attacks, and then I finished off with Professor X. So another great one. The good thing about Professor X being that he's immune to the reverse controls in case he does fire off. I think it's he puts the darkness thing on you in the SP2. So Captain Britain, very viable option. Professor X is the two that I used. Strife, again, the great thing about Strife, you apply a concussion to Mr. Negative, and then you can block all of his unblockable hits while that concussion is active. Falcon, again, a champion who crits a lot. You're just going to have to watch out for those unblockable hits. And then Hercules or any other high crit champions. Again, Hercules can, I mean, you get up his SP1 and then he's just going to be critting like crazy. So, but any other high crit champs, just watch out for that unblockable. So let's move on. We're going to 2.2. Now, 2.2 didn't have a whole lot of intricacies to it. So looking at your nodes, now the MCoC at the very beginning of that middle line, he's not too difficult, but he is there, so just be aware. Whenever a mystic attacker fills a bar of power, they gain a passive prowess, and then when you basically nullify something off of the opponent, that passive becomes, that passive prowess becomes a permanent prowess. So it only lasts for 15 seconds. And then it becomes a permanent prowess. So, that being said, you want nullify champions. Neutralize does not count. So you cannot use somebody like Wiccan or Tigra. You cannot use them in order to nullify. So that is a neutralize. So, looking at your nullify champions, you have Black Widow Clairvoyant, Dr. Doom, Juggernaut, Longshot, Mojo Sasquatch, Scarlet Witch Sigil, because when she actually duplicates, it is actually a nullification. Regular Scarlet Witch, OG, and then Sorcerer Supreme, Symbiote Supreme, and the Hood. And so I mostly used Doom and Sorcerer Supreme. They both did really well. There aren't a whole lot of overly difficult fights. There's a few little tricky ones in here, but no great specific like mystic counters for them. There is an Emma Frost in here somewhere down the line. I don't know where she be, but there is an Emma Frost in the map, and so if you are worried about Emma Frost, looking at someone who can armor break her, Sorcerer Supreme can do this, and Man-Thing can also do this if you do have a Man-Thing that you use, and Iron Fist, of course, is probably the easiest if you have a ranked up Iron Fist. The boss has some weird nodes on the boss. This was a really kind of strange fight. So, special damage is increased based on armor. The attacker's armor break and nullify effects suffer 100% ability accuracy. So, you're not going to really be able to armor break Doc Ock here. Knocking down the defender disables this reduction for 50 seconds. So, you can knock him down and then armor break him. And so, that does give you an opening. But he does also have explosive personality. So, you got to be a little bit careful about that, because once his armor breaks get up to 5, then you're going to take damage. And then this was, so there's ebb and flow as well, but the weirdest thing, guys, is meltdown. At the start of the fight, the attacker is afflicted with a meltdown timer for 30 seconds. Whenever the owner of the meltdown timer activates a special attack, the meltdown timer is refreshed and applied to the opponent with -5 seconds. And when the meltdown timer reaches 0, it deals a burst of damage of 2% of the attack, reset for 30 seconds, and applied back on the attacker. So basically, anytime anybody uses a special attack, it's going to switch hands. It's almost like a Bane, but it's a countdown timer to Bane, and it does a ton of damage if it detonates while it's on you. So you do not want it to detonate while it's on you. For this one, I used Null, and was also thinking a little about Infamous Iron Man. But again, if you're knocking the opponent down, anybody who can armor break the opponent, again, you can use, like, going back to our Cosmic Champions, Corvus, knock Doc Ock down, and then parry and get the armor break. You could do CGR if you throw that special 2. You can get about 7 armor breaks. Angela as well. Null doesn't nullify, and he doesn't armor break, so he just kind of takes the armor ups away. And so that works as well to get rid of that explosive personality. But just watch out for that really weird meltdown timer. That caught me on my Null, and I don't remember who I ended up finishing the fight with, but it was not with Null, because that countdown timer did get me. So, moving on to 3.1 here, and we have our first feature champion for the month. Now, when we're looking at our regular nodes here, what we have is tech attackers under the effect of an armor up buff will power drain the defender when they perform a well-timed block, and then whenever you power drain, you basically gain that fury. So for this one, guys, you want anyone with either an armor up buff or you want someone that can power drain, lock, or burn, even if they don't have an armor up buff. So you're looking at Nimrod, absolutely fantastic for this quest line. Ultron, Silver Centurion, Gilly 2099, Vision, Sam Wilson, Civil Warrior, Guardian, Hulkbuster, the new infamous Iron Man if you got him, Penny Parker, Warlock, Omega Sentinel. All these are fantastic options. So you got a pretty wide range of options. Now, as far as difficult fights in this one, there is a Yondu that is a little bit annoying for Yondu. Again, using someone who's not a bleeding champion, so who is bleed immune, Nimrod, Ultron, Darkhawk, Gilly 2099, Vision, any bleed immune champion, but especially if you have him in the tech class, that's going to really help out. The Electro actually wasn't too bad. The Electro, I actually used infamous Iron Man, and it worked out quite well. I mean, I took a lot of damage, but I still got the win and didn't die. So, hey, there you go. Also, a non-contact champion like Iron Man Infinity War would work out really well. And then finally, there is an Iceman somewhere on the map down here. And for Iceman, whenever you're looking at tech champions that really take out Iceman, I would either go with Warlock or Ghost, to be quite honest with you. Ghost is not going to have any of that real power drain ability, but if that's all you got, then you can do it. Just as soon as the fight starts, just dash back if she's not awakened, and you'll convert the Frostbite into a Fury. And then looking at the boss guys, who I just think, man, this boss is Spot. It's so simple, and he's got such a dumb name, but I just think he's really cool looking. So this was, again, not a hard fight. This is actually really, really easy. Each time the defender's miss is bypassed or untouchable or phase effect is prevented, the defender gains indefinite fury. You don't have to worry about that one too much. Whenever the attacker inflicts a disorient debuff on the defender, the duration of the attacker's future disorient debuffs is reduced by 10% to a maximum of 100%. Disorients against Spot are really good because it does not allow him to activate his portal shield, so that's really good. Stun vulnerability. While the defender is stunned, the attacker's attacks increase by 200%, so really, really good. You want to stun the opponent. But the problem is you also have a bubble shield. And so this is bubble shield 2. Each time the attacker blocks an attack, their block proficiency decreases by 4%. At 10, then they're going to be unblockable. So you want to block, but you don't want to block. And then finally, Polka Dot Power. The attacker gains no power from landing attacks. Instead, they are granted 12% of bar power anytime you have a damaging debuff on the opponent. Well, that's great, because he is a science champion, and you want to take skill champions against science champions, and there are a ton of damaging debuff skill champions. So I went with Nick Fury. Nick Fury just completely obliterated this guy. Really had a lot of fun with that one. He caught me off guard a little bit with some of his portal kicks and everything, but Nick Fury was great. Jabari Panther, Black Widow Deadly Origins, Blade, Elsa Bloodstone, Ronin, not Ronan, Ronin, and then Night Thrasher, Kraven, Karnak, Massacre. All these are viable options for the boss. And then finally, guys, let's move on to 3.2, where we have the new Mystic Spider-Man. I don't even know what he's called, Spidey Supreme or something like that. So for this one, we are looking again at skill champions. Skill attackers gain a permanent passive fury anytime a damaging debuff is purified, and then the defender shrugs off debuffs a whole lot faster in this one. So this is a really fun map because you just need guys that bring a lot of damage. So first off, starting off, Agent Venom, especially if you want to use the synergy and don't want to run a full team of skill attackers, use the Agent Venom synergy and just obliterate the life out of everybody. Black Cat, had a lot of fun using her. Black Panther OG, Black Widow Deadly Origins, Blade, Elsa Bloodstone, Falcon, Hawkeye, Jabari, Panther, Gwenpool, Killmonger, Squirrel Girl, Ronin, again, Fury, Moleman, Kraven, Massacre. All these are great damaging debuff champions that you can bring in. And then I think there's only 2 really weird or more difficult fights in this one, and one of them is there is a Nick Fury on the map. Honestly, I'm not going to bring in a skill champion for that one. I'm going to go with someone like Archangel, or I'm going to go with like a Toad, or my favorite, Penny Parker, because, again, there's not a whole lot of, you're not getting like a bunch of poisons or bleeds on you if you're not a skill champion. So I'm just going to bring in another class for that one. There is also an Unstoppable Colossus right up here in this middle lane, and the Unstoppable Colossus is immune to bleed, so you can't use a bleed. So you pretty much have to go with someone who has a damaging debuff that is not bleed. So that would either be Elsa Bloodstone, Black Widow Deadly Origin, Gwenpool, or Massacre. Finally, guys, let's talk about the final boss, the Supreme Spider-Man, Spider-Man Supreme, whatever you want to call him. So let's just go through the nodes, and then we'll talk about how to best fight this guy. First of all, you're going to get rooted every 12 seconds. The attacker will get passively rooted if you are close to the defender. So if you're close to Spidey, you're going to get rooted. Now, if you are far enough away, then he is going to get rooted. So just pay attention to the root timer. It's the little hand with the circle around it. And as it gets close to counting down, make sure you back up so he gets rooted. Just remember, when he gets rooted, he's going to be throwing a lot of heavy attacks. So just avoid those and dash in and just beat the ever-living crap out of this dude. Whenever the attacker gains an unblockable, unstoppable, indestructible, power gain, or evade effect, the defender gains a buff of the same version. So kind of avoiding any of the champions, and we'll talk about, of course, the best counters, but really avoid any of the champions that's going to be gaining anything like this. Above 1 bar of power, gain a fury. Above 2 bars, gain a precision. And above 3 bars, gain a cruelty. Not a big deal there. And then finally, bob and weave. All the defender's attacks are guaranteed critical hits. This is disabled for 8 seconds if the attacker dodges or intercepts the defender. Again, not a big deal. You are not going to be having a really hard time with the nodes except for that root mechanic. However, Spider-Man Supreme is a very tough defender. His SP2 can hit through block and give that burst damage, so you really don't want to push him with the SP2. He's going to be getting constant power gain, and you really do not want any buffs or any buff-heavy champions because he can steal those. So, the absolute 100% best champion, as you can see playing right now, is Quicksilver. He is cater-made for this. He does not gain buffs. Not to mention, when you throw your first medium attack, Spidey is going to phase, and you're going to be missing a lot. So, go into your, get your extra velocity going, and then back up a bunch of times. Hit your 300 velocity so that you do not miss any of your hits. This will prevent that mechanic from happening. If you do not have a Quicksilver, because he's still kind of new, dust off Daredevil Hell's Kitchen, as none of his attacks can miss. As well, Professor X, when he is above 25 of his cerebral charges or mental charges, his attacks cannot miss either. Those are really your 3 best options for this fight. That is it, guys. That is your Cavalier guide for the month. I hope this helped. I did not go down every single lane because for the most part, if you're doing Cavalier difficulty, you should be familiar with most of these champions. If this information was helpful to you and you do like this, I will continue to do this every single month when they release new event quests. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening. Enjoy the new champions that just came out. And as always, I will catch you on the flip side.